Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series. In fact, the very last webinar of 2022 that we are running to you on the HOP platform. So HOP, you can see the branding behind me, stands for the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. It is a website that we have every young person and school in Hertfordshire is aware of and using, because it is a home for a whole wealth of information and resources for you to help you consider your next choices, whether you're still at school, whether you're about to leave school, or whether you're already in the workplace but you want a bit of inspiration and guidance about your next steps. Do have a look at HOP. We've got a number of social media even channels, some of which you can see on the screen. We've even got a TikTok account now as well, so do familiarise yourself with HOP. The purpose of this webinar is to give you a bit of an insight into a particular industry or occupation that you would like to find out more about. So we have an expert with us today, Diane from Shepherd's Estate Agents, who is going to share some of her knowledge and experience and stories to help inspire you and guide you about your next steps, and to let you know whether an estate agent is a role that you want to go into. So over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we will have a conversation with Diane. I've got some questions that I'm going to ask her, some that you've already prepared for me when you registered to come onto this webinar, which we'll go through as well. But you have the opportunity, if you are watching this live, so it's Thursday, just gone 4:30. If you're watching this live, you have the opportunity to interact and ask your own questions, which you can do by typing them into a text box. You do that on the questions tab on your dashboard. So if you click on that arrow, it will open the box out. There's a text box in there, type the question in, it's only visible to me, and then I will direct it through to Diane for her to answer. So firstly, well, let's hear from our panelists today. So Diane, I've already named you, so let me give you the opportunity just to introduce yourself and to introduce Shepherds as well.
Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, my name is Diane Sanders, and I've been at Shepherd's Estate Agents for about 23 years. My husband and I bought the business in 1996. Having my husband started this office, actually, he literally left a national brand, came here for the single owner, and set the office up with a secretary. And back in those days, they had something called a Rolodex. So no computer, he just literally was at a desk cold calling, trying to drum up business. So when we bought the business, we were predominantly sales. We had about 5 or 6 lettings that we managed, and that was the potential that I realised. And we currently manage about 300 rental properties, 1 block managed now, but several commercial properties. And obviously we match that with our sales. So we have 2 offices, one in Hoddesdon, one in Cheshunt. Our Cheshunt office opened 7 years ago when we expanded and bought out another business. So yeah, we've been a big part of the feature of this high street in Hoddesdon for a very long time, and well, 3/4 of a decade down in Cheshunt already. Time does fly.
Absolutely. So you've said there that the Shepherd's branches then are in Hoddesdon and Cheshunt, which is right over on the east side of the county in Broxwood. Some of you watching this might be familiar with Cheshunt or Hoddesdon, but I suppose if you're not, the company thing to know is that, I mean, literally every high street and every town in Hertfordshire, whether you're in Berkhamsted, Letchworth, Hatfield, wherever you might be, there will be probably multiple estate agents, won't there, Diane? There's kind of so many. I did some research. I found out there's over 21,000 estate agents businesses in the UK altogether. I couldn't find a figure for Hertfordshire, but certainly you won't go far to find one, will you?
Gosh, no. There's plenty of opportunity and plenty of competition. I still don't think that online agents are that big of a competitor to most agents. They are very much perceived as the budget estate agents. You literally get a queue system, a board listing. There's no personal or professional standards, and as everybody, I think, understands your home is your biggest asset. It's where you have financed more often than not for 25 to 30 years on mortgage. And as I said, it is your biggest asset. So people want it looked after. And that's why the high street agent, I think, wins out over everything.
That's it. And the fact that there's so many of them, I guess, just is an example of the demand that there is for them. So I know if you were to put your head out the front door now at Shepherd's, look left or right, you'd have 5 or 6 competitors within eyesight, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I've got 5 within eyesight, absolutely. And it works well. I've got to be honest, I don't think we battle competition. I mean, in sales, there's a bit more of a what I call a sales aggressiveness, in the sense you're not a good salesperson unless you feel affronted that you didn't win that bit of business or you didn't sell that house. You've got to have that competitive edge. However, we don't actively have run-ins or clash with people often. There's enough opportunity and enough chimney pots in most towns these days to keep everybody busy. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so that's worth bearing that in mind, I guess. Just first introductory question, because I've seen this on a number of the questions that came in on registrations, and when we've spoken about running this webinar, lots of people use the phrase real estate. We're saying estate agent today. I mean, is real estate just the American term? Do they mean the same thing? Is there any differences between the two?
No difference. Real estate is very American. It's barely used here. It's like lawyer and solicitor. They mean the same thing, but here we call them estate agents. I mean, that's derived from hundreds of years ago, when realistically most of the landowners owned estates. They owned their own manor house, they owned the farm cottages, most of the village, and that's why it was estate management over actual agents like they are now, where we only manage one little castle, and that could be a flat or a mansion.
Absolutely, sure. Okay. Well, look, just set the scene for us, Diane. You're in the Hoddesdon office at the moment, so I suppose just adjacent to you, in the room next to you, there will be your team of colleagues sitting there at the moment. What do they do on a day-to-day basis? Talk us through a day in the life of an estate agent.
Well, every morning we start the morning with a morning meeting, because estate agency it moves continually. It's very fluid. You obviously get invited to go to evaluation. You've got to sell yourself and your products and your services, and then if you are lucky to win that, you then have to go back out, market the property, take it on, measure it up, do a floor plan. And nowadays, the marketing process is so sophisticated. It has to be competitive and also to be attractive. So all of the photographs take hours to get onto the system, because they're bracketed and they're edited, and you might filter out a number of things. So from originally meeting those people to getting something on the market, it can be quite a few days or weeks, depending on the level of marketing. If you're marketing one of our dual brand of Fine and Country level, we may order bespoke drone videos and booklets and get a journalist to interview them. So it can protract things out. So by the time we get to selling that property, we would have been looking at our database and wondering if we've got anybody, because we know that property is coming to market. Once it hits all of the major portals, then it will be out there on the information highway. we get lots of our upper end rental properties, for instance, mostly go to internationals coming over for UK education. So things that are above the 3,000 a month rental market will probably attract somebody who's putting their child in an elite private school. So in the mornings, everything's so diverse. In the day, we're always out. Unlike conventional office, if you're in a conventional office, you're at your desk. Here, you're in and out all day. So the mornings are a really good time to group together, to go through the diary and talk about where we were the day before, who's offered, what's available, what's come off market, what's sold. And then we go through the process of following up with buyers, vendors, landlords, tenants, looking from a tenancy side on any maintenance issues. And then on the sales side, there's a lot involved with chain chasing. I'll give you, for instance, at the minute, we have a chain that involves somebody buying a property just under £1 million, but it's two partners come together and they're both selling separate properties. Well, that has got such a large chain around it, and the selling and buying is called a chain. So you want the links to go together, but that chain is so big, one of our staff had to draft it, and they drafted it on an A3 piece of paper. So we're now working down as the chain gets tied up. They're now down to A4, but it can involve sometimes 10 to 15 properties. So that's what they'll do through the day. Thrown into that is at any time we can get live leads which are requesting viewings. If the property's empty, we will want to book that in as soon as we can because we've got key access. If it's a dual listed, as in dual listing means it's on with 2 agents, then we will want to be the first one in there. So again, we will prioritise that because we want to make sure that we've got potential to sell that property. So all of these things happen during the day whilst we're still trying to do all of the other elements, keeping vendors happy, keeping buyers happy, checking out the chains, and that includes ringing solicitors, new home sites. There are lots of elements of the chain where communication is vital, and chain progression can be quite an art in itself, because if you lose a deal, you can be working on a sale for 6 months and you don't get 1 penny until something completes. So whilst it sounds glamorous and fabulous, you're actually not making any money until completion.
Sure. Okay. Well, just for full transparency, just explain how does an estate agent actually get paid for it? So if I buy a house from somebody else, how does the transaction work? How do you guys sort of benefit from that in the middle?
The vendor is obligated under their contract between the selling agent and the vendor to make sure they pay the agreed fee. Now, the agreed fee is worked out on a percentage of commission. The starting fee is generally around 1% of the value of the property at selling price. So, say for instance, we'll keep it nice and simple. Say you were selling something for a flat for 200,000. If your fee's 1%, it's 1% plus that, so it's 1.2%. So your fee would be 2,000 plus the VAT. Obviously, the agent doesn't get the VAT, the VAT man does. But that fee, you would not receive a penny until it went through to completion. Now, with the sale of a flat, you've got the added problem that it's a leasehold property. Now, leasehold properties mean that the person who bought that property only owns the flat. They don't own the land it's built on. So with that comes an additional element and increase of paperwork, because there's a legal agreement between the leaseholder and the freeholder of the land. And then there's a management company who looks after the land and the actual building, not the tenants or the people in the building, but the communal stairways, the car parks, the paths. So all of those people have to get together all of the information surrounding what maintenance charges, what ground rent charges, that they've got the right to sell the property and the freeholders granting the lease. So if you sell a flat, it normally takes a couple of months longer than selling a house because of all the issues you've got involved. So selling flats is a lot more expensive for an agent because it's in process for much longer.
Sure.
So that can be a difficult thing.
Yeah, okay. So, look, I mean, I know that you at Shepherds have always been very good at, employing young people, perhaps people coming in, it's their first job since they've left school or college. I mean, probably you're not going to send them out to try and sell a multi-million-pound mansion in their first week. What sort of role is someone likely to do if they came into you as their first job?
Well, it's very much a hands-on job, and very much you learn on the job. We like to put everybody through the qualification stage. Generally, normally, when they've been here 6 months, a year, so that they've got a good groundwork and understanding of the role, whichever department they're in. And yes, we are a supporter and advocate for work experience. I mean, we've had several people start in our sales division from going from a Saturday person to then working, a work experience from school, then a Saturday person, and then working through here, and then undertaking all of their qualifications. And that's real good, strong progression. But on the job, they would be looking at how we register people. Again, data protection, we've got lots of issues around that. We've got anti-money laundering regulations. There are lots of things we need to be aware of. It is a sales role, but we're also governed a lot by legislation and Misdescriptions Act. You can't go stating things about a property that aren't realistic, because you would be sued. So there's lots of things, and there's also the element of transparency. If a vendor doesn't tell you something, then you're not liable. If the vendor tells you something, it has to be imparted to any potential buyer because you've been given that information, and that's really key and really important. So everything has to be in writing. It's always very key. So the trainees come in and they will shadow staff and see what they're doing. I mean, we've got a new chap started recently. He was working in a pub actually as a chef, and day 2 he was like, right, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? And I think he was so confident, he fully expected to go out on viewings on his own. And I was like, oh, slow down. Let's make sure that you understand. I mean, years ago, we've had salespeople who would go on a lettings viewing, very competent, very skilled salespeople, been in the business a long time, and they'd go along and somebody would be viewing a property, and these throwaway comments that people don't think about. Will the landlord decorate? Yes, I'm sure he will. Will the landlord remove this and put that in? Yes. So when that person came to the lettings department and said, well, hang on a minute, he said the landlord was going to do this, this and this, then you've got a very tenuous situation that can be turned into a legal matter. So it doesn't matter where you are, we ensure staff are supported to understand that they don't overstep any boundary, because, like I said, we are moving towards an American culture of suing people. So again, like I said, it's a case of making sure you don't get carried away, because you can go into a beautiful property and be totally consumed and forget why you are there, because they can be so beautiful. But as I say to everybody, it doesn't matter if a client is selling a one-bed flat or a mansion, it's still their property, their castle, and it still means the world to them. So, and that's also very important, that everybody's treated the same.
Yeah. So what would you say is the most glamorous side of the job? I mean, is it when you're in a point when you're going in and you're viewing mansions and you're trying to sell it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, that when we get a beautiful property on, actually, it doesn't need to be a mansion. We were looking at a home just this week, and I would call it a very regular family home these days for our area here, Broxbourne, Hoddesdon, surrounding area, Cheshunt. You can get, I mean, this was actually a semi-detached house. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, a semi-detached is where you get two houses and they are attached together, but they're not attached either side. So they've got free space either side, a detached house being totally on its own, and a semi-detached just two together. And it was a semi-detached house, but it was beautifully done and cared for and loved, and everybody was saying, oh, it's so nice. And I think it doesn't matter what the property is. If the person has decorated it nicely, has got style, you can get as enthusiastic about a small property. But undoubtedly, when you go to Wormley Bray Manor, where there's 40 acres and you've got apartments that are 1.2 billion for an apartment, you can't help but be in awe of the surroundings. And yes, it's that great feeling of poking your nose in somebody else's property and seeing how the other half live.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that. I mean, there's a question that's just come in, actually. If you do have any questions you want to ask Diane as we're going through, please do submit them in the questions app. But this is a really good one. What's the most unusual thing you've ever seen when you've gone to view someone's house?
Oh, I'm not sure whether that's something I could say. It's just going out to the ether. I mean, we've had plenty of bizarre things, outfits on backs of doors, underwear. But I think the most scariest thing, my colleague and I were unable to get hold of a tenant, and we went to the property to do a welfare check, absolutely thinking that he may have died in the property. And that was very emotional and very scary. However, he had gone off to Italy to see family for 3 weeks and he was perfectly fine. But we do often have to do welfare checks. We have to do bailiff attendance for evictions, and those situations are not nice. So they're probably emotionally the most upsetting. Yeah,
sure. I mean, you touched on something there, that it's a very intimate relationship that you have with your clients, isn't it? And for full transparency, our Diane's company sold our house for us last year, and I know that you end up talking to the agent more times than your other half a lot of the time. So you do really build up that sort of intimate relationship with with your customers. And for you, what's the thrill of being able to sell somebody a house, or sell someone's house for them, so that they can, or perhaps they're buying their first house? I mean, that must be one of the really nice things about the role, mustn't it? Just knowing the difference that you can make for someone.
I think a couple of things you said there, actually, because you're quite right. It is a very intimate role, a very intimate job. And I say this to everybody I interview. I think I said it to you when you came into the office, when you spoke about doing this. when people buy or sell houses, it's always because there's a birth, death, marriage, divorce, or job. All of the stresses that we relate to in life normally result in somebody moving. So it is very emotional anyway. And you're right, we get to see the worst and the best of people, because many times there's conflict, there's arguments, there's faultness. I mean, I have said over the years, I don't work in sales, I run the business and I work in lettings, but I have talked, if you like, vendors and buyers down and said to them, look, my husband is and was my estate agent the 2 times I moved, and both my moves took 7 months, because sometimes there are things that are out of your control. But what I always say to people is, it's your dream home, just be patient and it will happen. And I would say 99.9 times out of 10, it happens. So seeing that elation on the day they come in to collect their keys, yeah, it's fabulous. It really is. It's a good success.
Yeah.
And another thing about that, my husband, we have people come in here who say, oh, is that guy still here who sold me my house 15 years ago? And Adam will go, oh, hello, yes, I remember your house. And he runs them through all of the details, and they are amazed. And it is so nice, because they've come back because they had a good service. You know, we have been here nearly 30 years. But as a salesman, his memory of everybody's properties is fascinating. I always find that quite endearing, because the vendors really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no. And you've probably touched on it already, really, but we'll ask the question. I mean, what are the most challenging sides of being a estate agent? I mean, you said you must have some very difficult conversations when a chain falls through, and I know it happened to me. And once you've done it enough times, you realise that's just part and parcel of the experience. That it's never going to go as cleanly as you hope it would. But how do your staff cope with that, with those sort of really difficult conversations?
Especially for salespeople, their first fall through is probably their worst experience. Their worst fall through is even worse if they know the person has a tendency to be, you know, whether they're aggressive or emotional. You know, many times we've had people on the phone who want to speak to the owner because they didn't get a property. And there's always only one property, and there could be 10, 15, 20 people who want to buy it, you know. And if they don't get it, then they want to make a complaint. The complaint is that they didn't get it. There's not the service or procedures. And likewise, if you lose a sale, it's so hard to speak to somebody and say, I'm so terribly sorry, but you know, you're not going to get your dream home. The chain's fallen apart, or, you know, something's happened. The vendor falls ill, they take it off the market. I mean, there's a million reasons why those things happen. And we are the, if you like, the punch bag, because often the vendor hasn't got a relationship with the buyer, and they don't have a relationship with the solicitors or anything. So as you said, you spoke to us or our office a lot during the sales process. And so we would take that from both sides. So the way you deal with that, and again, I assume it's the same in many offices, is you've got to have joviality, you've got to have banter, you know, staff will let off steam, and that's important as anything, because as I said, we have lots of really stressful times. It is a stressful job. Like I said, we deal with people in stressful situations often for the reason most people don't buy a house just because they can or just for pleasure. They buy a house. You obviously get aspirational purchases, but realistically, even if you're buying because you've had a bit of a windfall, it's normally because it's convenient to work, of family, or a school. So there's always actually a motive behind it, unless you win the lottery.
Sure, absolutely. Right, let's just talk about the sorts of qualifications that people might need to become an estate agent, or what experiences they can gain, or perhaps more importantly, the sorts of skills and qualities that you would be looking for someone to have. So first of all, as far as I'm aware, there is no GCSE in estate agency or A-level in real estate. So are there any subjects that you would recommend that somebody do? There was a couple of questions that came in about, I'm thinking about doing business studies. Is this a good one if I want to become an estate agent? What do you think?
I think business studies, if you're going into any organisation, especially that has an office environment, business studies are always valuable anyway, because it's a qualification that will translate to many organisations. So that's never a waste. For us, for people who are eligible to train for estate agency exams or letting agency exams, you do need to have a minimum old money C grade English and maths, which I think is a 4 or 5. I think it's 5. And that is because you need those to get onto the course. That's not us setting that. It's to get the estate agency acceptance criteria. And we have a governing body. We're part of the nation's biggest professional standards organisation, which is called Property Mark. And with Property Mark, they run several umbrellas under that, one being for estate agents, one for letting agents, and one for commercial agents. They're the 3 primary areas. And we encourage all staff to meet the minimum entry level to be able to study. So that's quite important. As in key skills for everybody, those English and maths qualifications also translate into your daily life, because you need to be a clear communicator. You cannot be discussing finances, because we have to financially check buyers, and you have to be able to ensure that we're comfortable to do that. There's negotiations on fees, there's working fees out. On lettings, there's rentals, pro-ratering rent, bills. There's an element of maths and percentages across both disciplines. But also the biggest skill has to be communication. You know, as I said, when you're dealing with people in a stressful environment, if you have a propensity yourself to get wound up when people are wound up, it's not effective. You've got to be able to excuse this pun, kill somebody with kindness. We say it here all the time. We say when we've got somebody who's angry or nasty or confrontational, we always say we're going to kill them with kindness. We're going to be so nice that they're not going to be able to deny us a thank you, or you know, you've been very helpful. And that's, I think that's the art. You know, when you're selling, you do have to, and we're in customer service. You know, the customer isn't always right, and I'm a big supporter of staff in that respect. And we won't take abuse of staff. We don't hear, and that's just part of society these days. But you set your parameters and you make sure the staff are confident that they've got the support. But like I said, it is about communication, and if you aren't able to resist going back to people in the way they're coming at you, then you probably wouldn't survive very well on your nerves.
Yeah. So I suppose, looking for an example here, you're called out to go and do a new valuation. So someone calls you up and said, look, I'm thinking about selling my house. Can you come around and have a look at it? You go around there, and I guess you will be in the best position as the agent to know, well, we think it's worth this, and we can compare it against what else is out there. I suppose ultimately it's up to the vendor or the person selling the house how much they think it should be sold for, and I suppose that is where that could be quite a difficult conversation where those communication skills have to come in. You know, if you're adamant that this house is worth 500,000, but the person selling it thinks they're going to get £600,000 for it, for instance, there's negotiation in there as well, I guess.
There is. I mean, again, there's many factors an experienced agent will be looking at when they go to the property. First of all, they would have done at least an hour's preparation before they go to the property. They will be looking, because we have back office access to all of the property portals. So we will be able to drill down on all the houses sold in the area, all of the kind of internal sort of specifications of other properties. And you might turn up at the vendor's house and you might know it's not worth more than 500 and they want to put it on for 6. Now, at that particular moment in time, it's down to the individual to work out, if we put this on for 600,000, am I just going to waste the 15 or 16 weeks the contract's for, or might only be 12 weeks? Do I really think we stand a chance? And often we would walk away from that and say, we're not prepared to do that, so thank you, but no thank you. Or if we think that there's marginal merit, or you might pose a kind of structure. But sadly, there are, even in this town and in Cheshunt, there are lots of agents who do not operate ethically, and they will take a property on to list it, because the public, if they see a house in their road on at 600,000 when the last one sold at 5, they will immediately be ringing the agent who's got that one on at 6. So they might get 2 or 3 extra properties in that area because they think they're on at 6. But if you had information where you could drill down on who is selling property in your area, you would see that the person who valued it at 500,000 is probably selling and converting, and I can give you this as a statistic for Shepherds in our area, we convert about 78% of our sales. There are agents in this town that convert about 33% of their sales, and that is because they are listing, they're not selling.
Yeah, no, clearly there's there's a difference. Let's think. We've spoken about some of the skills that we've got. You've spoken about the business studies is a good subject. So the other thing to mention is, if you're working for an estate agent, by default you are working for what we'd call an SME, which is a small or medium-sized company. So you're not working for one of those huge companies. And I guess, I mean, just talk to us about the benefits of working for a small company. You must get to do lots of different things that you wouldn't necessarily do working for a large company.
That is absolutely true, Gareth. When you're working in a small company, I mean, we've got in Hoddesdon office, I'm actually in the basement here. That's why the office looks a little dark and grim. So I work down here with our accounts manager. Upstairs, all the lights and the swanky bit where all the clients come. There's about 9 staff here at this office. And at Cheshunt, there's 5 or 6. A Saturday, we've got a girl who works here as well. So all in all, there's about 17 of us spread over the office, and we have somebody who works out of hours emergency letting line. But what that does mean in a small office of under 10 staff, that there are going to be times where your job function crosses over sales and lettings, lettings and sales. And we do, everybody has to answer the phone. You know, nobody's too important or too posh or too senior. We all do that. We all make tea. You've really got to be able to be hands-on. The benefit of working for a small company is you get a much more interesting and wider specification of your role, because by definition of less staff, you're involved in more. And also, most of the nationals, internationals and national companies tend to be working solely on targets and figures. You're not a human, you're not a person, you're just a figure converter. And so I think that's the major difference, is you'll find it's a lot more personable working within a smaller agent as opposed to a large chain.
Sure. So another question I've got for you, I'm sort of going to paraphrase it here. You spoke about needing to have math and English. You gave some really good examples of some of the sort of functional math skills that people need to do. I mean, how does that relate to English? What sorts of English language skills would you need as an estate agent, and when would you use them?
Well, verbal skills are really important, because I said communication over the telephone, whether it's directions, spelling of people's names when you register somebody, getting their emails correct, being able to communicate effectively over the phone or in person is really important. But also, when we're doing things on lettings, we're doing contractual paperwork, you've got to have a key eye for attention to detail. Most of the contract and a lot of our documents are templated, so you don't necessarily have to be versed in the compilation of the contracts, but you certainly need to be able to put in the correct information. So it's attention to detail and obviously basic English. However, the nature of the world these days, most people communicate or text and email. And when you're selling somebody's most expensive asset, even if it is only a flat, I think most people expect to get a communication that makes sense and is understood and has got the right spelling. So it is really key when you're communicating and you have that ability to be able to put that into place. It's not complex often, but it does need to be right.
Sure. Okay. I mean, something again I noticed as someone who sold a house and bought a house at the same time is the language skills of trying to describe in a very small character space why a house is amazing. I mean, trying to think about it through the prism of perhaps GCSE English, persuasive language techniques, isn't it? You've got a very small space of time to be able to sell somebody why they should be interested in a particular house. I mean, that's a skill set in its own, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll be honest. The staff here, you're right. There's terminologies that they use often, and they've moved away a lot actually from acronyms. But when I first joined estate agency, estate agents used to use, even on decals, a lot of acronyms, which they had to get out of, because nowadays anything that's published on the internet for the lay person, which is the buyer seller, has to be in plain English and not complicated and not assumed that somebody might know it. So we fashioned a different language, if you like. But when we do our Fine and Country write-ups, generally staff will draft something, and then it will be myself or our media manager who would oversee the finalisation of the wording. and proofread it and change anything that's applicable. So,
Sure.
but obviously, the more developed skills that staff get, the better it is for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I'd struggle. I couldn't do it, Diane, because I would waffle. If I was trying to describe why a house was beautiful, I'd write a whole A4 side.
Yeah.
Probably you've got to try and get it within 4 lines. But I think, you know, people are watching this one and they are posting regularly on social media. I'm thinking, you know, Twitter particularly, you've got a character limit in that, so you've got to try and make your point within a that covers everything you want to say, but in a condensed way. But you can't go the other way and start using you know, bad grammar or putting you instead of you. You've got to use correct grammar. There really is a skill for it. There may be people watching this at the moment who are really, really good at that. But and I guess once you start looking at enough houses, or you've been doing it long enough, you start to realise perhaps reading between the lines as well. So if I'm reading a description of a house and it says lovely huge garden, and all the descriptions about the garden, I'm probably thinking, well, what are they not telling me about the actual size of the inside of the property as well? So there is an art to it. And I guess it's that persuasive language techniques of really trying to sell the things that are really great about a property, and there's an art in that as well, I guess.
Yeah. We do that all the time, Gareth. We'll sit in the morning meeting and they will put a slideshow on our system of one of the properties that's just coming on, and immediately everybody will say, oh, you've not shown a picture of the bathroom or this or that. And then that's when you know there's something awfully wrong with it, because you would absolutely set your photographs for portals in a manner that shows the best of the best first, and then anything that is not the best of the best, it would go at the bottom.
Sure.
So,
I mean, there's elements of, I guess, art and creativity that come into this, because I can remember when your photographer came to our house and took pictures of it. I looked at the pictures and I thought, wow, I didn't realise my lounge was as big as that. And there's definitely a skill to that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a skill, but there's also creative licensing with the size and lens of the camera, because, as I said to you, even on a basic house or flat, the photograph taking is really, really top class. You know, we've got very expensive cameras and lenses. They've got very expensive tripods. And then the bracketing of the photographs in itself is very complicated and takes a long time. And again, that's a really good skill that the staff take on board. And it can initially take them hours. It's like floor plans. They're really difficult to grasp. And, you know, there are some people, and we've noticed some members of staff who just do not have the ability to construct the floor plan because their brain doesn't compute in the same way. So it's about honing your skills. But like I said, for media, you're correct. We have to be on Instagram, we have to be on Facebook, we have to be on Twitter. Not so much Twitter. I think Instagram and Facebook are the two places where most agents seem to be heading. And you get the younger demographic on Instagram, and you get the what they call the middle-aged demographic on Facebook. So that is a huge media platform for estate agents these days. Sadly, nothing will overtake Rightmove for a very long time.
No, okay. Right, I've got a couple more questions to ask you. There's a couple of questions that have come in as well, and I think we're probably rounding up to an end here. I guess we've answered some of these questions already, but first of all, what reassurances would you give to anyone watching this, or particularly perhaps if there are any parents watching this at the moment, if their child was considering whether this was a career for them? Is this one that there's going to be demand for in 5-10 years time?
Oh, how would we sell a move house if we didn't have estate agents? I mean, our country is surviving and economically runs on the buying and selling of property. You know, look through COVID, it was critical. We were classed as critical workers because we had to still buy and sell property. I mean, it would have to be a nation of council-owned property if you wanted to think this wasn't going to be a steady career, because we are fascinated with property in England and we are always going to buy and sell. So I personally cannot see ever it being a solely online operation, because we buy with our heart. If you want to live somewhere, there aren't many people who buy from a photograph online.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I suppose, again, just go and have a look down your high street and look at how many estate agents there are, and that probably tells you that. So the second question on there, as much as you want to keep all your talented people in the, well, so A, in the business, but secondly in the industry, presumably people must gain such great skills from working as an estate agent that it must open up many other opportunities for them as subsequent careers.
Sadly, yes, because we are very selfish, because personally I like to think it's a great team. So we do nurture everybody, but to our own benefit and their benefit. I mean, we've as I mentioned to you, we've had several people who have come just for work experience, and I will give you a true life story here. He came for a week's work experience. He loved it so much, he sent me a lovely little note, and he said, if I get a Saturday job, can you take me on? We took him on as a Saturday job, and he said, I want to work here when I leave school. And I said, okay. And he said, but my mum wants me to finish my A-levels. I said, okay. And then a couple of months later, he came back and said, I don't want to do my A-levels. I want to come and work for you. And I said, absolutely not. Your mother wants you to finish your A-levels. You do them. He finished his A-levels and he said, you said I could have a job. I said, absolutely. He came and worked here. He did his study and qualifications, and he sadly left us about 18 months ago. And the beauty of that is we still see him because he's training to be a surveyor. So he comes in now here for comps. He comes in to do surveys on properties we're selling for vendors. And that particular year, when he left 18 months ago, we lost 3 amazing members of staff through career progression. But that's life. That's how we all evolve. And, you know, I look at those scenarios as a success, because those people have gone on to do even more amazing things. And that started with a career here.
Sure. I mean, surveyor, I guess, is a related occupation as, as well as it's in property. But I just can't imagine the amount of skills that somebody will learn and those sort of life experiences that you must gain as an estate agent that will put you in good stead, say, hopefully, to stay within your business and industry. But it really must open up some doors otherwise. You mentioned Property Mark earlier, Diane. Do you just want to explain what Property Mark are? And the QR code on your screen at the moment will take you straight through to their website.
Yes, Property Mark, it originally, for many, many years, was just called the National Association of Estate Agency. And as I mentioned, estate agents like acronyms, so it was the NAEA. And then they added on ALA, which is the Association of Residential Letting Agents. But 2 years ago, they actually set up this Property Mark name and it's meant to be a benchmark and trademark for industry. And they're really pushing for licensing. They're pushing for professional standards. In America, they've had licensed estate agents for 30, 40 years, and they are given a lot of credibility and a lot of respect. Whereas here, the pecking order of when you're in a sales progression, obviously you've got the professional solicitors, And back in the 1980s in the UK, estate agents were thought very much as wide boys, and you know, not working in a proper manner or conduct. It isn't the case now. Like I said, whether you're in sales or lettings, there's lots of legislation, lots of laws driving our professional standards. And if they bring in the licensing, it will only add to the quality of the job. And I actually champion that, because I think staff are better off learning. I'm still developing. I did an additional qualification last year. I got my level 3 on lettings qualifications. I'm going to do my level 4. I had to go back to do a GCSE in maths to be able to do that. But as a mum with a child who's finished university and one that's at university, I wasn't embarrassed by that, because I've always studied. I did a postgraduate degree just after I'd had my son, and I was working full-time in London. So I like to develop, I like to learn, and we're always learning, always learning. Laws change. In lettings, there's 135 pieces of legislation that manage my role, and that changes and updates every day. So
yeah,
you're always going to develop, you're always going to learn. And I think that's a challenge when you've got a workload on a daily basis to undertake anyway. But once they go to licensing, it really will add to the professional standards and credibility.
Sure. Okay. So Property Mark, have a look at that website. I mean, there's lots of good information on there, general information about careers in estate agency. So the other question that's come in that's worth asking is, how old do you have to be an estate agent? So would you take someone on after they'd finished GCSEs? You gave the example of someone who came to you once they'd started A levels, but you actually started with you once they completed them.
Yes, I mean, I'm happy. I mean, and I have spoken to parents in the past when children have wanted to do something, young adults want to go into the workplace before they finish their education. And I think it's great to work with families, not just the person who wants to take a role. But I think if you have the opportunity to get those qualifications, the basics, the minimums that you need, it's whether you do that at college or at school, it doesn't matter, but definitely get those, because that opens all of the doors for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then just to close then, sorry, there's another question here about apprenticeships. What apprenticeships are there in estate agency? So do you take on any apprentices or put people through apprenticeships?
Yes, in fact, all of the staff study, if you like, even when they're on the job. The qualification route we use is an in-house government funded route. So you're classed as an apprentice, but we have had also apprentices start from college and school straight into a 1-year apprenticeship, yes. So
yeah.
It just depends on what we're recruiting for at the time.
Sure, okay. And then, look, Diane, in closing, I mean, first of all, on the screen at the moment, for those of you watching, the QR code that you can see there will take you through to our HOP site, where all the previous, I think it's 60, we've done 62 of these webinars now in a couple of years. So we've covered a whole variety of different subjects within them. So last week we did hair, beauty and makeup. We've done cyber security recently, a firefighter. Have a look through at that QR code. Do tell your friends about it as well. You will find lots of different interviews about lots of different careers on there. Diane, just in closing, I appreciate I haven't prepared you for this question, but what would you say to someone as in sort of closing comments here? Why is a career as an estate agent a really aspirational one, and one that you would encourage people to consider?
Oh, where do you start? I mean, I can honestly say, personally, my own journey, and I am only speaking of my own journey. I was brought up in Cheshunt. I'm from Hertfordshire. For the first 13 years of my life, I lived in a council flat with my parents, and I had a very ordinary upbringing. And as I said, it doesn't matter what career you work in, it's working hard and driving yourself and ambitiously makes you succeed. And I've had 2 children. I've never not worked. I've worked throughout my my children's youth, and I've said to them it was always to better support them. And you know, they've had a great life. They've had good education. They've both been through university because it was their choice. But I think I am privileged. I have a nice house, and we have a nice life. But I'm not saying I couldn't have got that in another career elsewhere, but estate agency has enabled that.
Sure, okay, and that's a really powerful message. And of course, you're saying that as a parent as well, that at least one of your children has come in and worked for you as well, and has been able to progress their career as a result of that. So I think that's a really nice point to close on. So firstly, thanks to those of you that are watching this, particularly those of you that are watching live and have submitted questions. We hope you found this useful, hope you found it inspirational. It's going to help you with your next steps. But particularly my thanks to Diane for giving up her time this afternoon and sharing some of her experiences and knowledge and insights with us also. Diane, thanks so much to you for coming in and joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And we wish all of you the very, very best with your future career options. Do come and visit us at HOP. Do have a look at the website, have a look at the social media channels. There's plenty on there that will help you. So all the best with your future careers, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you.